very appreciative to.
Well, these are live pictures of the US Secretary of State, John Kerry, speaking to the media outside of those talks in Geneva. Let's have a listen to what he has to say.
Tremendous work, and his efforts over the last months to help to give life to a political process in the midst of a conflict that is in many ways out of control and deeply disturbing to everybody in the world, I hope. The cessation of hostilities that we were able to negotiate and put in place over the Christmas holiday and into January has had a profoundly positive impact on the lives of many Syrians during the time that it has been kept. And over much of Syria, the violence has been significantly down, many lives saved, and many communities have succeeded in having humanitarian assistance delivered after, in some cases, years in which they had no humanitarian assistance. But it is a fact that in the last weeks, the cessation of hostilities has been put to test, and it has frayed in certain areas, and it has fallen completely in a few areas. And so we are engaged in an effort with all of the members of the International Syria Support Group and with Russia particularly, in an effort to restore that cessation of hostilities in those places where it has been most at risk or most shredded. In particular, in the last hours on Saturday morning, we were able to restore a brief period of the cessation going back into effect in East Ghouta and Latakia. And now we are very much working and focused on the question of restoring the cessation of hostilities to the remaining areas where it's been disturbed, but particularly to Aleppo. And Aleppo is particularly disturbing to everybody for what has happened there. There are 3 health clinics now, 1 major hospital, that have been attacked from the air by bombs. There are only 2 air forces flying in that particular area. And the Russians are clear that they were not engaged or flying at that time. The regime has clearly indicated a willingness over a period of time now to attack first responders, to attack healthcare workers and rescuers. And the attack on this hospital is unconscionable under any standard, anywhere. It has to stop. The last pediatrician who was serving people in the Aleppo area was killed the other day in this hospital, not to mention probably some 250 civilians, some of whom were killed by the other side. So both sides, the opposition and the regime, have contributed to this chaos. And we are working over these next hours intensely in order to try to restore the cessation of hostilities and at the same time to raise the level of accountability that will accompany the day-to-day process of implementing this ceasefire. To that effect, Russia and the United States have agreed that there will be additional personnel who will work from here in Geneva on a daily basis, 24/7, in order to, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in order to try to make sure that there is a better job and a better ability to be able to enforce the cessation of hostilities day to day. I will be talking later today by telephone with Foreign Minister Lavrov, and Stefan de Mistura will be traveling to Moscow tomorrow for meetings. Yes. And our hope is that over the course as soon as possible. We're trying to press this as fast as is possible, but I don't want to make any promises that can't be kept. So we are trying in the next hours to see if it is possible to reach agreement that can not just re-implement the cessation, but create a path forward for the cessation to hold so that there isn't 1 day of silence or 2 days of silence, but an ongoing process that relieves the people of Syria from this devastation, from this day-to-day killing machine that is being unleashed by the Assad regime. And obviously it is incumbent on the United States and our colleagues in the International Syria Support Group to keep our part of the bargain, which is to make certain that the opposition is living up to this agreement. And it is incumbent on Russia and Iran, as they have accepted responsibility, to make sure that the regime is living up to its part of this agreement. At the same time, it is imperative that the full measure of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2254, which not only calls on the parties to have a cessation of hostilities, a country-wide ceasefire, but it is imperative that the humanitarian access that was promised in that resolution is delivered. And the regime, unfortunately, is still preventing access to certain communities. So that has to be part of our ability to be able to get back to political talks. You cannot have legitimate political talks about peace when the parties at the table have both signed up to an agreement which calls for a full cessation of hostilities countrywide, as well as a full delivery of humanitarian materials countrywide, and yet one party is blatantly violating that agreement. So this is the moment to try to make certain that what everybody has signed up to is in fact being delivered, being lived up to, without hypocrisy and without variation. And that's what we're working for, and I'm hopeful that over the course of the next day or so, greater clarity will be available as to exactly what progress has been made. Stefan, thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you, yourself, Secretary Kerry, for having been so actively involved and coming all the way here to Geneva to address urgently an issue that you are very much caring about. It was the US and Russian Federation who on the 27th of February were able to do a miracle. Now that miracle is becoming very fragile, so fragile that it's really risking a lot. And you mentioned it, Aleppo in particular needs to be addressed. 254 victims have been taking place during the last few days. 3 hospitals, facilities have been touched. There is no excuse for not finding again, reinvigorating and reinstalling and re-implementing what has been the only strong message the Syrian people have heard from all of us, that it's possible to have talks when finally the cessation of hostilities is reducing the violence on them. Tomorrow, as we discussed, I'm going to Moscow, and the message will be exactly the same. I hope really that the message that we gave at the Security Council the other day, appealing to both the US and Russia and the special team that we have, which is called the International Support Group, will be reinvigorating what has been a major achievement. So in the next few days, we will hope to do so. The Syrians are asking for that every day, by the way, every day.
Thank you, Stefan. And I forgot to mention, obviously, I shouldn't forget, I met earlier with the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, Adel Al-Jaber, who will be meeting with Stefan shortly. And he agreed, and we agreed, to make maximum efforts with the opposition itself in order to make certain that they are ready and prepared to go back to the table the minute a cessation is in place appropriately with these new mechanisms, and the minute that the humanitarian blockade is opened up. These are very important things, and I think we're all agreed that we need to make progress on them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that was John Kerry, the US Secretary of State, and the Syrian Special Envoy, Stefan de Mistura, addressing the media, just giving the latest on the Syrian talks, saying that progress was due to be made.